America's creepiest cold case. Who killed the boy in the box? The boy in the box. Before we begin, smash that subscribe button if you think you can handle the darkest corners of history. Like this video, drop a comment with your theories and stay until the end, because what you're about to see will haunt your mind. February in Philadelphia had a sharp, bitter edge that year, and the streets were cloaked in a gray fog. Most residents were huddled in their homes, but one young man, walking along a narrow path cutting through the woods in the Fox Chase neighborhood, noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. A cardboard box, crudely folded, lying among dead leaves and underbrush, seemed out of place. Something about it didn't sit right. Kneeling down, he peered inside and froze. The small body of a boy, no more than 4 or 5 years old, was curled inside the box. Naked, bruised, and shockingly frail, the boy's eyes were open, staring blankly at the canopy above. His hair was clipped unevenly, and faint abrasions marked his tiny hands. Even from a distance, the boy's suffering was evident, the product of neglect and deliberate harm. The man stumbled backward and ran to call the police. Within minutes, uniformed officers and detectives arrived, the forest quiet except for their hurried footsteps. Chief Inspector Harry Kelly was first to reach the box, his face pale beneath the brim of his hat. He crouched, studying the small body, the folds of the blanket, the worn edges of the box. He knew instantly this was no ordinary tragedy. This was something far darker. The scene itself seemed to echo with silence. The box had once held a baby bassinet sold by a local department store, and the boy had been wrapped in a cheap, threadbare blanket. The faint markings on the cardboard suggested he had struggled, but the bruises told a story of repeated abuse. For a child to survive this long, to suffer in secrecy, implied a cruel hand guiding his fate. Someone who wanted the boy's life erased. Detectives quickly launched a citywide search for any clues, plastering thousands of flyers across Philadelphia. "Who is this boy?" the posters asked. "Does anyone recognize him?" Despite the urgency, weeks passed with no answers. Neighbors claimed no knowledge, families reported no missing children matching his description, and no one stepped forward. The boy had no identity. He was, effectively, a ghost. As the investigation unfolded, strange inconsistencies emerged. Witnesses recalled seeing him in different neighborhoods with different adults, yet no placement records matched. Social workers' reports from foster homes hinted at neglect and abuse, but the files were incomplete, some missing entirely. Notes scribbled in a detective's journal suggested a possibility too disturbing to ignore. The boy may have been shuffled between caretakers intentionally, exposed to harm at every turn. Officers pored over every detail. The texture of the blanket, the faint chemical scent on the fabric, the subtle scratches inside the box. Nothing seemed random. Even the surrounding area was meticulously noted. Footprints in the mud, a crushed twig here, a smudge of blue fabric there. The meticulousness of the crime hinted at someone who was not only capable of cruelty, but practiced in concealing it. Rumors swirled in the city. Some believed the boy had been the victim of a wealthy family trying to hide a secret. Others whispered about abusive guardians or foster homes that had operated in silence, their actions shielded by authority or fear. Every lead seemed to spiral into another maze of uncertainty. And yet, for every false hope, the boy's story remained frozen in time. Then came the first shocking discovery. An old letter, yellowed and folded, ad, addressed vaguely to the Philadelphia Police Department. It was unsigned, but it claimed knowledge of the boy's final days. For decades, the note had been overlooked, filed away in a cabinet of unimportant evidence. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, almost taunting. The words suggested a familiarity with the boy's movements and hinted at someone close to him, someone who had watched, manipulated, and finally discarded him. Detectives opened the locked cabinet where the letter had sat, decades untouched. As the envelope was unfolded, the words inside revealed something chilling. "He will never be found. No one will know. I have done what must be done." The implication was clear. This was no random act of cruelty. Someone had planned it, someone had executed it, and someone had walked away without consequence. The investigators stared at the words in silence. The room felt colder, the shadows longer. The boy in the box was no longer just a victim. He was the center of a conspiracy, a puzzle whose edges were sharp with betrayal and secrecy. And somewhere in Philadelphia, someone knew the truth. The case had just begun, and the darkness surrounding Joseph Augustus Zarelli, the name he would eventually be given decades later, was only beginning to unfold. The investigation deepens. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Like this video and drop your theories below, because what you're about to read will take you inside decades of one of America's darkest, most haunting cold cases. The abandoned apartment was a time capsule of neglect, frozen in the mid-1950s. Dust-coated furniture, yellowed curtains, and stacks of old newspapers filled the cramped space. As detectives stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of mildew and chemicals. On a small creaking desk lay the remnants of someone's secret life: notebooks, faded photographs, and a box with scraps of fabric. Among them, a letter, its edges frayed, hinted at knowledge of the boy's final days. Investigators meticulously examined each item. The photographs showed neighborhoods and children unfamiliar to them, yet one image stood out. A boy whose fragile frame and solemn gaze mirrored the descriptions of the boy in the box. The notes beside the image hinted at movement, placement, and punishment. Whoever had written them had intimate knowledge of the child, someone who had watched, controlled, and finally discarded him. Detectives revisited old witness statements, carefully cross-referencing names, locations, and timelines. A pattern emerged. Joseph had been shuffled between households in the months before his death. Each placement carried a risk: neglect, malnutrition, or worse. Social workers' notes indicated complaints about unexplained bruises and injuries, but no one had acted decisively. In every household, there were adults whose silence and compliance may have allowed abuse to continue. The team also returned to the scene where Joseph's body had been found. Using modern forensic techniques, they enhanced photographs and examined soil and vegetation. Small clues: the faint scratches in the cardboard, a trace of chemical residue on the blanket, suggested that Joseph had fought for his life and that the perpetrator had been careful to cover their tracks. It was a meticulous crime, deliberate and chilling. Meanwhile, DNA testing of the fabric scraps from the evidence box revealed traces of at least 2 adults. One could be matched to a man long suspected but never arrested, whose fingerprints had appeared in other minor criminal cases from the 1950s. The other remained unidentified. This raised the possibility that Joseph's death involved more than a single perpetrator, a network, or at least an accomplice, working behind the scenes. Community members from the 1950s neighborhoods were interviewed. Elderly residents recalled a foster home known for strict and harsh discipline. Several former children from that home reported seeing Joseph in the weeks before his death. They described him as small, quiet, and fearful, a child who had been passed from household to household, never able to find safety. The investigators began to understand that Joseph had been systematically isolated, vulnerable to anyone entrusted with his care. The chilling letters from 1957 were analyzed using modern forensic linguistics. Experts concluded that the author had first-hand knowledge of Joseph's death, likely the final guardian or someone close to him. The letters were careful, almost taunting, implying pride or cold indifference. Whoever wrote them understood that their words could remain hidden for decades, safe from scrutiny. As the investigation deepened, a ledger was discovered in the archives of old social welfare offices. The dusty, leather-bound book detailed child placements and notes about behavior, health, and guardians. Joseph's name was among the entries, accompanied by cryptic annotations: under observation, punishment administered, and won't last the week. These records painted a disturbing picture of deliberate neglect and abuse, spanning multiple households and adults. Detectives realized the scale of the conspiracy. The boy's death wasn't an isolated crime, but the tragic outcome of systemic failure. Adults responsible for his care had either ignored his suffering or actively participated in it. And yet, even with decades of evidence, justice remained elusive. Some of the perpetrators were long dead, others had vanished or changed identities. The network of silence and complicity shielded them from accountability. Then, in a twist that sent shivers through the team, an anonymous tip arrived in 2023. A simple message: look at the old ledger from the Fox Chase foster homes. The rest is hidden there. Following the tip, detectives retrieved the ledger, revealing more coded entries and references to adults involved in Joseph's final days. One note stood out: they don't know, but they are watching. There's a punishment administered and won't last the week confirmed the terrifying reality. Multiple adults had overseen Joseph's suffering, and the fatal act was the culmination of long-term abuse. The handwriting matched one of the letters discovered decades ago, confirming that at least one author of those taunting notes had been a direct participant in the boy's final days. DNA testing further confirmed traces from 2 adults on the fabric scraps found in the original box. One matched the deceased guardian, but the second profile remained unidentified. Investigators suspected that this second individual had orchestrated events behind the scenes, the hidden hand that ensured Joseph remained nameless and forgotten for decades. Despite advanced technology, this accomplice had successfully erased themselves from official records, their identity still a shadow in the investigation. Community testimonies added layers of horror. Elderly residents recalled a man from the neighborhood, highly respected in public, who had a peculiar fascination with controlling children. He was polite, charming, and unassuming, the very image of normalcy. Yet those who had grown up in the area whispered about his cruelty in hushed tones, memories suppressed by fear. This man, they suspected, might have played a role in directing Joseph's placements and ensuring the boy's final demise remained hidden. The city itself became a character in the story, its streets and alleyways a labyrinth of secrets. Detectives retraced Joseph's final steps, mapping every placement, every household, and every suspicious adult who had been near him. They discovered a chilling continuity. Each adult Joseph encountered had either ignored his suffering or contributed to it. Each layer of neglect and abuse compounded until the boy's life was cut tragically short. And yet, even with all this evidence, the most